Hello and welcome back to Junk Food Joyride. Today we're going to be retrofitting some projector headlights I've bought off Trade Me into my MGF convertible. These cost me about $40, so if they don't end up working too well, no big loss. First you start off with the headlight housing and you just remove the metal bracket that holds in the existing H1 bulb. Simple enough, it's only the two screws there, Phillips head. Next, these raised tabs need to come off. So you just need to mark them where you're going to cut them off. I've just used a permanent marker here. And I'm just going to use my handy dandy angle grinder to do this. It's quick and easy, no dramas. Just make sure you use a mask and some eye protection, obviously, as this does create quite a bit of dust and flying pieces from the bits you're cutting off. Also use gloves. I didn't because I'm an idiot. Now I just tidied up and flattened off all the surfaces I just cut off, just to make it a bit nicer. Spent a little bit of time tightening it up so I was sure it was going to fit correctly, and I recommend you do the same. Once you're happy with it, then we can move on to the next steps. So I just laid a bit of the packing material down just to protect the lens as I was doing a bit of a test fit here. To test fit, just needed to remove the brackets that were already on it during shipping. It's just a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Excuse my hands that are in the way. Try not to drop any screws into the headlight as I just did. Yeah, there's the 3 screws out, bracket off, and then there's this little screw here as well. Got a little bit tight at the end there, but came off. Next I just put on this little rubber silicone end, and now I'm just drilling a hole into the headlight housing so the wires have somewhere to go, just like that. And when you're drilling a hole, it's always best to start small and work your way up, just as I do here. Give it a nice little brush off to get all the dust off. Always like to have a clean working area. So now time for a bit of a test fit. I ended up cutting the connectors off as I just soldered my iron on. So you just need to feed the wires through the little hole you just drilled. It's a little bit of a pain, but they do come through. Then just slide the projector headlight through. Make sure you orientate it the correct way. In my case, the wires are to the bottom. Then you just use this large washer that comes in the kit. And then just slides on one way, and then you just use the little alloy screw and that holds it all in place, just like that. I ended up using a bit of thread locker just to be certain that it wouldn't come loose, and I just used the indentations just to give me a rough guide about how it's lining up in the headlight housing. It ended up working out perfectly just using the indentations on the projector housing and really just eyeballing it. As I said, just a little bit of Loctite. And this just really gave me a bit of peace of mind that it's not going anywhere. And there you go, it's all screwed on. So that projector headlight is now permanently into the housing. Did just tighten it up as tight as I felt comfortable. You gotta be really careful because the threads on the housing are plastic. Next up, we've got to modify the bulb retaining clip, and we've just got to add a little spade connector that kind of mimics the original one. This is what we'll be using. First up, I'm going to take off the plastic sheath. And now I'm going to mark where I'm going to drill a small hole into the clip. Just like that. And just using a small drill bit, just going to drill a hole, and I'm going to make it just big enough so the end of the spade connector can fit through. Again, you got to be really careful. And just go slowly. So that fits through perfectly. Now I'm just going to bend it up.
Shut up and sit down.
And once I've got it bent properly into place where I want it to be, I just crimp it using some pliers. Now I'm going to solder the two together. So I'm just using this metal block just to kind of hold it in position. And then just using a standard soldering iron, just solder the two pieces together, and this should create a nice and sturdy connection. And as you can see, the solder joins the two pieces together nicely.
Shut up and sit down.
Next we're going to install the bracket onto the housing. Slides in one way, just the 3 and the 2 fillet head screws, just hold it in place. They don't need to be super tight, just nice and snug. So now we're going to move on to the wiring side of things. So we're just going to splice it into the existing wiring for the headlights. To do this, you just need to take off the plastic caps. On the black wire, I can't remove the plastic easily, but that's alright, I'll just be able to solder on from there. Get your 2 bits of wire that you're going to use and just strip off the ends. Now just going to solder the red wire to the 12 volt. I'm going to check a cable tie on just to keep it nice and secure. And the black hook does fit back on perfectly. Now we're just going to solder the ground to the headlight ground. This one was a little bit trickier, but I just used the same method and I was able to get it done nice and easily. Just be careful not to melt the plastic housing too much. I unfortunately did, so I just cut the top off. Nice little cable tie just to keep it all together. And just a little bit of cable management so it all looks nice and tidy and it doesn't get in the way of anything. So next up, we're just going to attach the connectors of your choice to the positive and ground for the headlights, and this is for the daytime running lights and the high-low switch. So I'm going to use a little bit of heat shrink on the red and black wires, which is for the high-low switch. And that's predominantly just to keep it nice and tidy. It's also going to go over the daytime running light wires as well. And that's just so they're not all just flopping in the breeze. A little bit of heat gun. Just like that, nice and tidy. So I'm going to use common ground for both the daytime running lights and the high-low switch. And I'm just going to use bullet style connectors and I'm just going to crimp them. I'm not going to bother soldering because a well crimped connector would give just as good a connection as solder, and there's not going to be too much strain on these, if any at all, so I'm not concerned at all. Just make sure that when you are crimping it, just make sure you do it so it's nice and firm, because you don't want them coming loose. So the positive wire gets its own bullet connector. And I'm going to hook the other side of this connector up to the high beam positive wire in the headlight housing. And so that way it'll be switched on when the high beams are turned on. So in the headlight housing itself, I'm going to attach the female side of the bullet connectors onto the wires we had stripped earlier. So the red wire here is connected up to the high beam positive, and the black wire is connected to the common ground for the headlights. And if you're wondering how I'm going to power the standard low beam lights, it's going to be through the existing black and white wires that you see on the right hand side there. They're just gonna slide onto the connectors that are already there. So now we've added all the connectors, we can clip it all back together. So you can see I'm just pointing out where the corner side clip goes into. So put the two power wires together, they just slide in like that. It's quite a tight fit, which is good. And then the same for the ground wires, just clip them together. And I'll show you how I connected the daytime running lights up a little bit later on. So I'm just connecting up the daytime running light clip just like that. Now this just gets pushed in until you hear a nice little click. And that's in. I'm going to turn it around just so we can connect up the connections and tidy up the wires just a little bit. So the little marker light can just slide back in, and I know it doesn't look the greatest, but it works perfectly fine. Now we can install the H1 bulb. Before we do that though, we're going to install the chrome headlight surround. So we're going to need to take the housing back off, and using these 4 screws, just put it back together. So it can only go on one way, and it just slides on nice and easy. And you just use these black plastic screws. Doesn't matter which one you start with, but you just have to be careful when you're doing the nut. You don't want to do it too tight because you will crack the housing.
Shut up and sit down.
So again, just till they're snug. So I just get each one started, and then I go around again and tighten them up. So that's the top two done. Just move on to the bottom two. Again, taking care not to over tighten these. Almost looks factory. So it's going to go back into the housing. Same clips again.
Shut up and sit down.
Push until you hear the click. Spin it around and tidy up the cabling a little bit, and connect all the connectors again. So the extra wires in there do make it a little bit messier, but if you're careful, it all looks pretty good at the end. So again, just connect up the bullet connectors. Ground to ground. And positive to the positive, which is kind of slipped away under there. Fished it out. So now time to install the original H1 bulb, and that just pushes straight in. It's quite a snug fit, so it's quite good. Then you use a little wire bracket, and that just slides into the two end holes and then slides into the little retaining slots. Then we can connect up that bulb. I'm going to have to change this connector because it doesn't quite fit onto the spade connector I installed earlier. But that's really simple. So I'm just going to cut the end, this connector off. Just like that. Strip the wire. And crimp on the correct female spade connector end. Again, making sure it's nice and firm so it's not going to come off or wiggle loose over time. And that slides over perfectly. So that's the low beam side all done. Now we can just install the high beam headlight bulb. And that just goes in exactly like factory. Sorry, before we're going to do that, we're going to install the headlight adjusting screws. And so they just twist in and then pop into little holes on the inside. This bottom one is a little bit different. I don't know if you can see in there, the light's a bit garbage, but it just slides in and up and then twists into place, and that's held secure. Okay, now we can do the high beam bulb. This bulb can only go in one way, and it just gets held in by this wire retaining clip. And the connectors, once you figure out which way around they go, just pop back into place. So the only wire left is the positive for the daytime running lights. So that's essentially the finished product for the install. It looks fantastic in my opinion. A couple of marks on the chrome housing, but it's a 25-year-old car and I'm not worried in the slightest. It's going to work, and it does work 100 times better. And in my opinion, it looks almost factory, like it came like this. The halo ring around the projector definitely isn't period correct, but it looks fine. and I'd rather have the daytime running lights than not have them. Now I'm going to put on the glass cover. Now it only goes on one way. So you can't really mess it up, and it's only held on by these metal clips here, and they just go on the tabs on the outside of the glass cover, and they just pop on just like that. Go around and pop all those little metal tabs on. Make sure you get them around the right way. I'm missing one, but they hold on perfectly fine and I haven't had a single issue being one short. So that's that housing essentially complete. The only thing that's left is to wire up the 12 volt for the daytime running light and chuck the plastic covers back on. Let's start off with the bigger one. It only goes on one way, and then you just give it a little twist and it clips on. I ended up drilling a little through hole for the smaller cover for the positive daytime running light, just because thought it would be alright like this, but it did chew up the wire just a little bit. Nothing to be concerned about, it's just more cosmetic than anything. But with the hole in the little cap, it looks much better. And so these factory adjusters on there, they work. And like I was saying, this positive wire, all you gotta do is connect it up. And I'll show you where I connected it up to just in a little bit here. First we just got to put the light back in, and here we go. So I connected the daytime running lights up to these green and white wires, so they're both switched ignition, and I just spliced into one of those and ran a wire down to where the headlight is. I ran all the way across to both headlights and just spliced the daytime running lights into them. And so I just followed the existing wiring harness along the frame there. So there's the other completed one I've done with the daytime running light wire hanging out there, and I was just showing you where I was going to run the wire through to. So let's get busy and splice these wires. And just like that, I spliced in with a bullet connector, ran the wire down the existing cabling and spliced in with another bullet connector into each headlight. I'll then run the wire across the front of the air conditioning condenser, just a couple of cable ties there, tightening things up, and finally into the other headlight. So that's pretty much how to install some projector headlights, retrofitting them into existing headlight housing. As you can see, the daytime running lights work perfectly, and the headlights also work, and with a little bit of adjustment past the warranty fitness. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and watch my other videos. Thank you.